Hello, everybody. This is Chris. How's it going? I'm having a little bit of technical difficulty at the moment trying to share my screen. Unfortunately, this is my first live stream, and I'm using some streaming software that I thought was going to be broadcasting to this channel. Unfortunately, it's broadcasting, I believe, to a different link. So, bear with me. I'm going to pause the stream for a moment, and then I'm going to come back, hopefully, with a new link that I can send out on this chat. All right? Stay tight for a few seconds here. Thank you. Okay, hey everyone. I've just pasted a new link into the YouTube browser here, or the live chat, sorry about that, which I believe will now allow me to share my desktop. So if anyone who's watching can go ahead and click on that link, we'll see if we can get this going. Okay, hello everybody. Hopefully you're able to make it over to this new link, and you should be seeing a weird screen right about now. And we're going to go ahead and click over to a new window. All right, I'm going to proceed at the moment as though you can actually hear and see me, although I don't know for sure that that's true, but I'm hoping it is. With a new link that I can send out on this chat. All right, stay tight for a few seconds here. Thank you. Okay. So let me just check one more thing here, and I believe that we are streaming. Hopefully you found the link, otherwise I'm talking to a bunch of people who can't hear me, and I'll send out the link later. So let's get back into it. Couple of quick notes. This is my first live stream, obviously, so a little technical difficulty. Two things. I decided not to turn on the camera for the live stream because I realized that even as small as I could make it, it was eating up a lot of space on my APX 500 screen. I'm also only working off one monitor right now, so as I've switched over, I can no longer see live chat. So if you ask a question along the way, that's great. I will try and get back to it. And obviously, you can always email me or give me a call as a follow-up. So this is going to be a live demonstration, not a PowerPoint. So the only reason I have this quick PowerPoint slide up here is just to show you a little bit about what my setup is looking like. So I've got my APX 515, and with it I have the APX 1701 transducer test interface, and that is managing my microphone inputs for this demonstration. For my loudspeaker, which I will be performing the EQ function on, I've got a powered loudspeaker, so that's coming straight out of the balanced analog output of the APX 515. I've got my nice half-inch audio precision measurement microphone that I'm using as my reference mic. to create this EQ file. And then I've got a device under test. Honestly, this video really is meant to show you the EQ process, so we don't necessarily need to measure a microphone, but I thought it would be nice, and I happen to have it, so why not? All right, I'm going to leave behind the PowerPoint screen now and get us actually into APX 515. And here we are. I've got a nice brand new APX 515 or APX 500 project file that I'm going to use as my starting point. So a couple of quick notes here as I pull up my phone to make sure that I remember to tell you everything I wanted to tell you all. We're going to cover a few different topics today. So some of the features we're going to be using that you might not have used in the past include auto set generator level, calibrating a microphone using transducer electronic data sheet or TEDS, adding derived results to a measurement, exporting data sets, and of course creating the EQ table that we're going to use to equalize our speaker. So the first thing I'm going to do, as I always do when I start a new APX project, is I'm going to set up my signal path and my inputs and outputs. In this case, I'm going to be using the transducer interface as my input, and I'm going to be using analog balanced as my output, which is already set. For the purposes of our first step, I'm going to say we have one channel at the output side, which will remain true throughout. And I'm going to say we have only one channel at the moment on the input side as well, and that is going to be my reference microphone. So, in order to make that microphone active, I'm going to turn on CCP power to it. If you possibly can hear some relays clicking in the background, that's a good sign. And if I whistle, I should be able to see on my FFT monitor down here an input to the mic, which I happen to be standing right next to. Now I'm going to go ahead and click the box on input that says acoustic. And mainly what that is going to do for me is it's going to transform all of my input units from volts RMS to dB SPLs, so that when I make my measurements, I can see them in the units of interest, which in an acoustic response measurement will of course be dB SPL. Next thing I will do is check to make sure that my microphone connectors are correct on the APX 1701. In this case, I am using the unbalanced input for my reference microphone in channel number 1, and that is already there as the default. Now I can go ahead and click Mic Cal button, and that will bring up the window to calibrate the microphone. If you haven't looked at this before, there are a couple of different ways that you can do this using a standard calibration checker, which generally will generate a 1K tone at, say, around 94 dB SPL or 114 dB SPL. I can stick that on my microphone and simply click the calibrate button here. If I don't have a calibrator, and I also don't happen to have the ability to read TEDs, I could, if I wanted to, simply type that calibration into this sensitivity value. I happen to know it's around 50 millivolts per Pascal, so I'll just type that in. But in this case, I have the option to, and I want to be extremely accurate, so I'm going to click TEDs, and I'm going to choose which mic I'm looking at, microphone 1, read from TEDs. And what that does is it looks at a small chip that's actually inside the microphone and preamplifier combination that has the actual sensitivity value of the microphone and where it was measured. And that's going to apply that as soon as I say set sensitivity. Okay, I can go ahead and close that with my new sensitivity added. And now I'm ready to go to the next step. So I will go back to input and output. And you'll notice that as well as having an acoustic checkbox on my input, I also have an acoustic checkbox on my output. So I'm going to check it, and as soon as I do, I'm going to get this little flag that says my output references have not been set. So in order to do that, I will check the acoustic output level box that pops up as soon as I check the acoustic button. Okay. Now here, I can set a variety of parameters, the most important of which is going to be the target value, or what I want to measure the speaker at, what dBSPL value, and even more importantly, a start and stop value for the generator. So this will allow you to make sure that you don't overload or overdrive your speaker while you're setting your acquisition. Since I am doing this at home today, I'm going to keep it a little bit on the quieter side. I'm working in my office, so there's going to be quite a lot of reverb in here as well. I can adjust these start and stop values. I happen to, of course, have done a little bit of a trial run here, so I know that it's somewhere around here, and I can change how many steps that the generator uses to divide as it seeks out that target value frequency, or sorry, target value level. I'll go ahead and say start, and the microphone and speakers are in the room with me, so you'll hear the signal generator moving around in voltage output as it seeks to regulate to 84 dB SPL at the measurement microphone source. Okay, every once in a while we will see that it is unable to achieve the target level. That can happen for a variety of reasons, and if you do see that, you can adjust the start and stop parameters and give it another whirl. And I realize in this case, actually, I may not be going low enough. Let's lower this down a little bit. It's possible that 84 dB SPL is a little under where my initial test was actually at 94 dB SPL before I realized it was kind of cranking in my house. There we go. Okay, so now I've regulated to 84 dB SPL, and I can see on my generator down here that as I have 84 dB SPL set as my output level, that is indeed what I'm measuring more or less at my input. Okay, now that we've done that, we've got a calibrated system where we know the output level of our speaker, at least at 1K, and we know the sensitivity of our microphone so that it is measuring correctly as well. The next thing I'm going to do is add a measurement to this signal path. And there are a variety of measurements you could use. I'm going to use acoustic response because it does have the nice windowing feature, and I am in a completely untreated room at the moment. So let's go ahead and add that. And here we go. We have our nice acoustic response measurement. So what we want to do is essentially measure our speaker using the reference microphone and take a look at its response curve. Now, I have a couple of parameters to set here. Of course, the sweep time and the sweep level, and the frequency that I'm going to sweep from, and the frequency where the sweep will stop. Now, I happen to know, having looked at the data sheet of my studio monitor, that it obviously is not going to measure all the way down to 20 Hertz. Specification says about 48 Hertz, so I'm going to just say 50 Hertz, and we'll call it at that. And I'll bring the measurement level back up to 84 dB SPL, and I'll go ahead and give that a quick run. And I have a variety of responses here, including my impulse response and the energy time curve, which you can take a look at, as well as the RMS level and relative level. Now, we don't really need to necessarily worry about the acoustic response windowing here, but I did happen to make a quick measurement in my office space to see where my first reflection point was. It's about 6 feet, more or less. So when I go and look at my relative level, that'll make it look a little bit nicer to have that windowing applied. If I want, I can right-click on the graph and go ahead and say auto scale and bring that into line so that we can see everything. That's a pretty nice looking curve, actually. It's not too jagged. But before I go to the next step, I'm going to go ahead and add a derived result here. Derived results allow you to do a variety of things. You can take averages, you can specify single data points out of a sweep graph, and quite a lot of different things. All I'm going to do this time is just apply some simple smoothing to my graph so that it looks a little bit nicer. All right, so that is my relative level normalized to 1K and smooth with third octave smoothing. So if we look at 1K here, you'll see that is 0 dB. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the graph data button up at the top and bring up the graph data window. And what this is going to show me is all of the points in my measurement that I just took. And what I want to do is export those. So I'm going to choose export. I'm going to say uncheck all because I really only care about one, the relative level with the smoothing applied. Okay, and I can specify data points here. The recommendation, I believe, is same as graph. You can select all the points, which with a continuous sweep will give you quite a huge data set. So I don't necessarily recommend that. Or you can specify some specific number of points. We're going to stick with same as graph. Since we only have one measurement and one channel, these parameters are not really relevant right now, but if we happen to have made multiple measurements, we can choose which one we want. Measured one, and if we have more than one channel active, we can choose which channel we're using. Of course, we only have one channel, so that's all we need. So I'm going to say OK. Now it's going to prompt me to create a new Excel file. So I'm just going to name this EQ1 and save it on my desktop, and off it goes. All right, we've completed the first step of the process, or the main part of the EQ process, which is to export our data of the speaker's frequency response. I'm going to go ahead and close this signal path now. If we like, we can rename that signal path, so if we save this, we kind of know what was going on in there. So I'm just going to rename it calibration. And now I'm going to add a new signal path. And of course, I'm going to start the way I always do, by setting up my inputs and outputs. And I'm more or less going to do the exact same thing that I just showed you. On the input side, I'm going to choose the transducer interface. I'm going to turn on the CCP power. I'm going to check the acoustic box so that my units get measured in dBSPL. I'm going to go to my mic cal, and I'm going to calibrate channel 1 from TEDS again. Now keep in mind, channel 2 is going to be my device under test, so I may or may not know the sensitivity of it. If I do, I can enter it manually. If I don't, that's all right too. We can figure it out later. So I set the sensitivity of my reference mic. I'm going to go ahead and close that for now. I'm going to go back to references, and I'm going to do the same thing here. My output is analog balanced, it's a single channel, and it is acoustic. And once again, we're going to try and regulate our output to a target value of 84 dBSPL. And I think we said 25 millivolts to maybe 100 tops. We'll go ahead and give that a shot and see if it could hunt it out. Okay, there we go. Now, for the moment, I'm going to leave this. Actually, I'm going to change this to just a single channel. So we're going to go and get this set up to measure our DUT. But before we do that, we're going to take a look and do a couple other quick things. So I'm going to once again add an acoustic response measurement. And close. And close. Make sure we keep our parameters straight. So 50 to 20 hertz, 20 kilohertz, relative level, auto scaling, and a derived result. It kind of looks similar. It looks a little bit different, and I think that's a lot to do with the room factors that are going on here. Okay. Now let's go back to our signal path setup in this second signal, and we're going to actually make our EQ. So up at the top, I've got on my output a field called EQ, and right now it says none. So we are going to create a new EQ. And that will bring up a new window that will allow us to go ahead and import the Excel table we just created a few moments ago. There it is. I say open and import. And we'll see a graph that more or less looks like the curve we made just a few moments ago. So this is the response of the speaker, but I want to remove the response of the speaker and make it as flat as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to invert that curve and say OK. It will ask me to give it a name. I'll say OK. We'll just stick with the default. And we've now applied an EQ. Now if I go back to my measurement here and look at my relative level, which actually does look somewhat like what I recall it looking like, I should be able to run another sweep in the append mode. And uh-oh, what happened? What may have happened is it might like us to redo our acoustic output level. Hopefully that'll work. It worked in my... Okay. And while I'm here, just for the sake of it, I'm going to turn my device under test microphone on because we'll want to look at that. Now, hopefully we can see a flattened out equalization. If not, we'll have to take another track. That's better. Okay, so it's a little bit squirrely, and I think that's because of the low frequencies out there. But we do have more or less a more flattened out EQ response. I'm going to take this append off and run it again. There we go. Now, if you look at channel 1, which is my blue channel, you'll see I'm pretty close to within just a couple of dB of being flat. Not too bad for my echoey office. And if we look at channel 2, this is actually my reference, I'm sorry, not my reference microphone, my device under test microphone. So we now have our initial response for the device under test. All right. This is more or less what I was hoping to show today. So hopefully you've been able to follow along, and the video will remain online. If it's deemed to be good enough, it will probably be moved over to AP's main YouTube channel. But for now, my intention is to do this every Friday afternoon and just show a new little feature. So what I'm thinking is, it's all nice that you were able to see how to equalize your speaker and make some measurements really quickly, but it's kind of a laborious process and it involves multiple signal paths and multiple steps. It would be kind of cool if we could automate this. And as it turns out, well, we can. There's a lot more features in the APX 500 sequencer that we can use to automate this procedure. Say, for example, if you want to make it so that a person who knows nothing about doing this can follow along step by step, we can do that. So, next week, I think what we'll do is talk about how to automate this procedure. And I think I'm going to throw in one other little tidbit that might be useful, and that's the difference between our two different EQ points. So very quickly, you notice that when I made my EQ, I did it in signal path setup right here at the actual output. But if you were watching, you may have also noticed that my acoustic response measurement also has an EQ field. Why are there two EQ fields? It's going to be a mystery until you can join me next week. So in the meantime, I'm going to tab over to my PowerPoint main slide so that you can once again get a look at my contact info. If you haven't met me before, I guess I should have said at the beginning, I'm Chris Gill. I'm the Northern California sales engineer for Audio Precision. I also work in a lot of the Midwest